This is part 3 of my Spiccato tutorial, the top 5 mistakes I see people making when they play off the string and how to fix them. You ready for this? It's violin time. Hey, I'm Lynn and I'm founder of Violin with Dr. Lynn. This is part 3 of my Spiccato tutorial. If you missed part 1 and part 2, I have them linked down in the description box below, and somewhere on the screen you can click on them to watch them, to catch up. Today we're going to be talking about the top 5 mistakes I commonly see when people are trying to play spiccato, and we're going to learn how to fix them. So the first mistake that I see the most often is people trying to control the stroke. That's mistake number 1. And I spent a long time getting over this mistake for myself as well. I was under the impression that to get a better spiccato, I need to have a control over the stroke. This is not the case, however, because when we consider the fact that this is a rebounding mechanism, the bow, the string is a rebounding mechanism as well. It will teach us the amount of bounce that it likes, combined with the amount of force and velocity and where and the contact point we are. So if you are not sure what I'm talking about, please review parts 1 and parts 2 of my spiccato tutorial, where I do review the 4 bow properties, the 4 bow factors of spiccato, as well as the differences between spiccato and sautille. So the common mistake is that we're trying to control. Yes, we do have to be in control of where the bow is in terms of contact point. We do have to be in control of where we are in the middle zone of our bow. That is for sure. However, what I mean by is having too much control is that the bow wants to bounce on its own. We have to let it. It's like taking a ball and trying to force it to bounce by pushing on the ball. It's the same as if I took something like this. If I took something like a card where it has a natural a rebound to it, it's trying to teach me how much pressure and velocity I need to get this to rebound back up. So it depresses and comes back up. If I try to push it, this is not bouncing, I'm trying to control. But if I do it in a certain way, it will rebound on its own. You see that? If I do this, this is not bouncing. This is me trying to control. Same thing with this device. This is a face wash thingy. So let's take this angle. This is going to teach me how it wants to bounce. It does not like to bounce when I do this, but it will bounce when I do it at the proper speed and intensity. So I have to actually get it to bounce. I like to think of it as when you're standing on a diving board, and if you're on a trampoline, if you're trying to bounce, and you know how it feels like to not get a proper bounce on a trampoline. The larger the trampoline, the deeper you can go. But if it's a very small rebounder, you can do very light bounces and pounces to get the bounce activation happening. So you have to let it teach you how the bounce is going to work. So with your instrument and your bow, and like I mentioned in previous part 1 and part 2, the bow is going to teach you what it likes. Every bow is different. Now, if you're trying to control the stroke with your fingers, I see this very often where you're trying to control each stroke with your fingers. This is too much control. So the trick that I like to do is to examine what exactly we need to do or not do to get the bow to bounce. So what I like to do is to isolate the different parts of the arm structure, from all the way from the last distal joint knuckle all the way to the ball and socket joint here, and all the way to the collarbone and the shoulder blade. So if we're going to isolate, let's try isolating just the knuckles here and the fingers. So I'm going to isolate by holding on with my left hand, seeing what is needed. So obviously it does not like it when I'm trying to control the stroke here. I can barely get it to bounce. If I grasp here and free the wrist here, and try to stabilize this part, It's getting a little better. Now, if I free up from here, it's getting a little freer and the sound is opening up. Now, I'm going to allow this ball socket, arm and the ball socket to be free. So that is my exploration on how I can not do too much control. Allow the stick to teach you how much it likes in terms of how much pressure and force. Another way to examine how to not exert too much control with the fingers in spiccato is to actually return to a fist, to holding the bow with a fist. What that teaches me when I do this is to remind myself that this bow stick has its own bouncing property. If I allow it to teach me how much it wants to bounce, then I can therefore figure out how much finger cooperation I need or not need. So if I just ask the bow to bounce by just using a fist. Here we go. So I can get the bow to bounce on its own. I do not have to use fingers to control the bounce or create a bounce. That's the word, create. I do not have to create a bounce. The stick will bounce for me, and I'm just crudely using a fist to activate. And that's a word I like to think of when I want to have the bow bounce. The bow stick needs to be activated. It doesn't take much, as you can see. So this tells me that when I add the fingers back to the bow hold, they do not have to do any active work. What I'm actually asking my fingers to do is to be reactive. So whatever the bow needs, the fingers are flexible. As if you're keeping your knees bent, the knuckles will be able to be absorbing anything that is coming from the bounce of the bow, but I'm not creating the bounce with fingers. There's a big difference. So in the exploration that I did, I want all of the joints in this entire structure to be able to cushion any impact. Okay, the second mistake that I see people doing when they play spiccato is they are too stiff in the fingers, the hands, and the arm. Mistake number 2 does relate to mistake number 1, trying to control. When we try to control, we get stiff. Now, these two are so closely related. When I think of being stiff, then I love to return to the analogy that really works for not just spiccato stroke, but for any stroke on the violin. I like to think of the entire bow arm and hand as an entirely big paintbrush. This is the handle, and these are the bristles. We don't paint with bristles only. We hold onto the handle and let the bristles react to the motion of the paintbrush. Okay? So if I return to that feeling, there's a sensation that the entire brush is one cohesive unit. So if I were to be stiff, which I sometimes see, and I sometimes even see locked pinkies, that doesn't help, because once you lock a joint, then other joints will stiffen up as well. And you can hear how my sound went a little bit more brittle. That's, whoa! Wind. So you can see how when you lock a joint, it impacts the sound and your spiccato stroke. You can hear the impact on my sound. Okay, and mistake number 3. Okay, before I tell you about mistake number 3, don't forget there's part 4 coming, so don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And so far, so good, right? If you're liking the video, go ahead and like it, because that really tells me that this is being very helpful to you, and that means I can make more knowing that you're getting a lot of information. Okay, so mistake number 3 is that people are often in the wrong part of the bow. As I mentioned in the previous video, don't forget to check part 1 and part 2 out. you want to be in the correct part of the bow, what I call the middle zone. I sometimes see people trying to play spiccato passages and they're just in the wrong part of the bow. Usually they're too low, and then they start to try to, because it doesn't bounce naturally there, they try to control, which leads to mistake number 1. And then mistake number 1's not working, so then they stiffen up because they think that they have to remedy it by stiffening up something to create a bounce. So these 3 mistakes are all related to each other. How do we remedy that? First, be in the right part of the bow, in the middle zone. Remember that the slower the stroke will be a little bit lower, and the faster the stroke will be a little bit higher in the middle zone. And I'm moving up as I slow the stroke down. I'm just about 2 centimeters at most. And I'm creeping up until I'm about balance point. But if I want to go faster, you hear how my sound is cramping up here. I'm not in the right part of the bow. If I move it up, there, it likes it there. So that's very important. I would suggest that if you're in the wrong part of the bow, experiment with one tempo. Let's say this one. That sounds cramped to me. Slowly work your way up the bow and find where in the bow that particular tempo works. They're starting to jump here. And I'm starting to lose it about there. Okay, so we've explored too much control, too stiff, and the wrong part of the bow. These are 3 mistakes out of 5 top mistakes, so don't forget to check video number 4. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you in the next one.